Got my green shirt on for this one, hopefully a brighter green. So we're going to talk today about a very strange topic that I don't know if I've ever addressed because I've always kind of ridiculed it for the most part, but it's a postmodern notion of kind of creating your own reality. And I have to say this is somewhat speculative, and it's not the same exactly as the way that the postmoderns would often phrase it. So I don't think alone it's quite true. When held tightly, it binds itself pretty close to a sort of narcissism. It's been talked about many times, this kind of orientation of this first person perspective, changing the outside world. You yourself are the change agent for which creates this world. But that part I'm going to try to poke holes through. But the solution isn't really a solution because it comes down to something very dreamlike. But it's the only way that I can frame this that makes sense to me in my experience. So rather perhaps it's more like everyone shifting through dimensions or realities to a huge degree according to their subjectivity. But the habits of existence are incredibly strong. So that is to say that you can think about carbon atoms. The patterns that they go through day to day are very, very strong, and it's not something that often shifts, right? So rather what's happening is you yourself are shifting to different kinds of realities where those patterns might be different. So to be slightly more precise, I guess, the cosmic habits generally remain fairly static, and maybe some exceptions occasionally, but because it's so ingrained, it's so hard to move them. And it's not really you that are moving them, but rather sort of you shifting your place for which they are moved. Again, different place that this pattern is different. Again, I don't have a clear answer as to how that happens. It's a mystery if and only if this is true. And they do have their own patterns of their own outside of you. So even if you shift to a different place, there's still, especially when we're looking at sentient organisms, they are self-autonomizing things. They create their own patterns and legitimacy in the world. You're still interfacing with another being, for if you don't think that way, you're slipping into solipsism, which is an extremely dangerous, self-isolating pattern of thinking. But rather, this would maybe be considered more like a lucid dream, but it's a shared lucid dream. But lucid dreams, again, are far less habit-based. There's far less ingrained nature to that pattern. Your psyche's what's playing that up. Whereas in this natural world, there's way more patterns that have fermented for billions and billions of years that stabilize itself into a less shifty kind of thing. But it's not really that they themselves are shifting, but rather you may be shifting to a reality where indeed the pattern is the case. So it's incredibly important to note that dream patterns are vastly more shiftable than exterior realities unless you yourself are carving the very boundaries of the exterior world in a profound way. And that's what you might call something like you are living is in and as a mutation. You're mutating the cosmic habits around you by your very being, in a certain sense. It's a weird thing to think about. So in that sense, with increasing awareness comes increasing freedom or shifting cosmic habits. But beware, this is often a hard-fought route, and leaders really truly are those with many arrows in their backs. You're carving a new pattern. You're subject not only to madness, because I'm not saying it's because of there's no patterns there that have been built up to experience and understand the new cosmic habits that you are carving out. It leaves you in a very precarious place because there's no structure for which you're coming from. So these habits and patterns, being rather concretized, can and are generally hard to shift for most people most of the time. But increasingly, when looked through with this lens, are potentially more easily shifted by this very insight. So by the clear understanding of this conceptually and living through it, there's more likelihood that this kind of mutational kind of process would and does occur. Thus, the green realization, when and only when, although rarely, applied without the overly first person, that narcissistic orientation, is balanced more with a first, second, third, and fourth, embracing the fact that you are experiencing this with others. So therefore, it's a more holistic kind of approach to this concept, hopefully. And it may produce, therefore, some profound insights to impart through its understanding if it's true. So I've also been thinking this through notions of, the kingdom of heaven and these sorts of things. What that would mean if you're shifting through realities to, so paradoxically, it could be an act of God that puts you into a place where you are in that kingdom of freedom. But could your soul withstand that mutative capacity? Or rather, does it require a developmental process to be able to tolerate it first and then go into it? So that's a tricky question, and I don't necessarily have an answer for it. It's something that I personally struggle with as well. But it was just this is a line of thinking that was interesting to me these last little while, and share it. Be well.